How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another Tech Support Thursday installment. This is going to be ticket number 2. Before I get into ticket number 2 and doing the questions, there's actually quite a few questions that are here that we're going to be going through. I just took the VMware Advanced Professional Data Center Virtualization 6.5 Design Exam. Talk about difficult. A lot of reading. I passed. So that's the first thing. So woohoo! But very, very complicated. The main reason for that is because, well, you're having to read a lot of scenarios, and then you're given specific responses based off of what they're asking you. So, like, what is the risk? What is the assumption? What is the constraint? What is the requirement? One of the main things that I had to use when I was going through and preparing for the exam was I read the VCAP DCD exam or book, the data center design for VCAP5, so vSphere 5, written by Paul Mcsharry. He and I have done a couple of exchanges on Twitter. He's a VCDX, so obviously design is kind of his thing. So it was a really challenging exam because, number one, I normally don't do very well on design exams because, number one, design is what? Subjective, right? So I was actually pretty happy with the overall result. So I'm gonna go. So yeah, that's that. I'm gonna probably take a day or two off from. I've been studying pretty hardcore for that one for the past week or so. But it was one of those things where it's like, how do you study for a design exam? I mean, seriously, how do you study for design? And the answer to that question I found is, you really can't study for design. And the reason I say it that way is you really need to understand the technical stuff first, because if you don't understand the technical bits to how VMware works, then it's going to be that much more difficult for you to basically know how to answer the questions. Because they're asking you how you're going to deploy something or what you would take into consideration when looking at a deployment when you're given a series of, or a set of criteria or a scenario or an example of something that the CIO has brought you to this and you're the virtualization architect. You've got to figure out what it is that you need to do. I scored pretty well on the exam, and I'll put somewhere on the screen, I'll post my results so you guys can see that. But, I mean, it was a difficult exam in the respect that, well, number one, it's not something that, again, I consider myself very strong. Design is subjective. The term depends comes into play a lot in design. So, but I really feel like if you have the technical depth in the area that you're being asked questions about, and you've taken into consideration how things work, you're going to be able to answer design questions a little bit more effectively. I did pretty well in the exam. I scored just under a 400, and you needed a 300 to pass, and it's a 300 to 500 range. So I'm guessing I got about an 80 on the exam. I felt pretty good. I was able to answer most questions. So some were more scenario-based, which they had really long, like full screen width from left to right of all the details that you needed to understand, and what I refer to as some of that information is a distractor, some information that isn't necessarily relevant to what they're asking, and then you have determinators, what specifically you need to pull out of the information provided to you in order to make an informed decision on the exam responses that are available to you. And I found that there were a few times where I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense at all. Like how would I interpret that? But you have to interpret the entire body of the question. That's where you really need to be able to break down, okay, what is it am I being asked? What are the specifics? Stuff like that. So yeah, I passed that exam. Pretty happy about that. I'm going to transition now into the deploy exam, and I know I have about 3 months or so, because at the end of June is when the current 6.7 exam is retired, and I'm trying to get that done before then. So trying to crank out as much as I can. I'm going to be deep diving into that stuff, going through a bunch of labs and recording videos on it and stuff like that. So that's going to be my deploy. Deploy is going to be much more hands-on, and I'll actually have to travel. So where I live, I have to travel about a half an hour to go to a Pearson VUE testing center that will actually support the deploy exam. I've looked it up. I chose to do design first, only because of the fact that the exam retired at the end of April. So I got that done. Fortunately for me, it was a one and done exam. I'm fortunate that I've spent enough time in the VMware area. I've done enough VMware deployments. I've been involved in enough architecture decisions to where I was comfortable going into that. If you've just passed your VCP for VMware, like you're just getting into VMware, maybe you've only got a year or two in VMware and you just passed your VCP and maybe you didn't score that great, low 300s, I definitely think you would need to spend a lot more time reading the documentation, read the Mastering VMware vSphere books that are out there. One's by Nick Marshall for 6.0, read 6.5, read 6.7, and they're going to integrate a lot of different things with that. Also read the Data Center Design book by Paul Mcsharry. Really good resources there. But again, design is subjective, so you really have to take the time to dive into how it actually works and understand the technical pieces first. So when you're being asked questions about stuff, you're going to be able to kind of know based off of the technical pieces how that's going to work. Because they'll ask you questions on like vMotion and HA and fault tolerance and storage and vSAN, and all kinds of stuff that you need to be able to, you have to know how all that stuff works first, and then you can take into consideration, okay, what combination of said technologies will bring me to the appropriate design criteria to meet the customer's need. And that is something that you really need to take into consideration when you're looking at design. So yeah, it was about 2 hours for the exam and 60 questions. I obviously didn't take anywhere near the 2 hours. I think it took about 45 minutes. Oh, and the Pearson VUE exam experience. When I first logged in, you do your walk around, you take the pictures, submit your whatever identification proof that there is, all that type of stuff. When I got done through all of that, the queue was set up, and I think there was like 78 people ahead of me in line, and then every minute it would refresh. So it took about 15 minutes for the proctors to get through all those people, and then when it came up to be my turn, there was a problem launching the exam. So I'm like, oh crap, am I going to have to reschedule? And so I sat there and waited for the next round, because then I got dropped back in the queue of 7, and I went through it, and then they popped in on me two things that they made me do that I've never had to do before, which was a little like interesting. I have an IP phone that's sitting just below the camera and behind it a little bit on a little table, and it's a 9971 IP phone, and that was facing me. As a matter of fact, I'm going to turn it around because it bothers me now that it's not facing me, because if somebody was to call me, there we go, and let me do that real quick. So I'm actually going to go, and you guys can probably hear the dial tone. And then I had a box of tissues, like that box of tissues right there. That box of tissues was actually sitting on top of my tower. So I have a Dell XPS 8930 gaming desktop, and it was sitting on top of that. And they're like, can you move that? I'm like, okay, sure. I don't argue with them, because, I mean, the price of the exam is $450. I wasn't about to sit there and argue with a proctor and then get failed or revoked. I'm like, sure. I'm like, weird request. I don't say this. I think it in my head. Weird request? Sure, I can do that. And then they're like, can you take your webcam off and show me? I'm like, sure. And so, just do what they ask. Don't sit there and be argumentative. I find that if you just do what they ask, they let you right in, it's less stressful just to follow what they're asking. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the first of many tickets or the first of many questions for this particular ticket that we might have. So I'm going to take these from the oldest, the last one I can remember doing. Okay, I need to go back a little further. Okay, so there was a couple of questions that I got from the ticket there, Actually, I need to go further back than that. Okay, there we go. So I've got this first. This was a comment on the VMware NSX overview. I'm a bit late for the party, but thanks for the overview. Very enlightening. I did a while back. Was it 4 years ago now? 5 years ago? When I first learned how NSX worked at a high level, the architecture piece, I went ahead and I recorded a video on how you would take NSX and how it would map to a physical environment. So check that video out if you haven't. I'll try to remember to put it in the description. This is a reminder from me to put it in the description. Go pull the URL. Okay, there was a comment on SD-WAN. Welcome to Next Gen Networking. I have seen the heaven. I mean your channel. Well, I thank you for your kind words. It definitely means a lot to know that the videos are helping you guys out, which is why I do them. All right, so I got on Tech Support Thursday ticket number 1. I had a couple of questions, so I'm gonna expand this one because it's quite lengthy. Maybe this is a comment, but I'll read it anyway. Regarding question 1, I experienced the same issue with TFTP from vEdges and vBond, and it looks like some vEdges vBond releases do not support old and unsecure FTP, or TFTP, excuse me. There are multiple ways to resolve this, though. Below are 2 of the fastest and easiest. Number 1, on vEdge, go to shell and execute command tftp-g-r and then pki-ca, which is the certificate itself, and then the IP address, where XXX is the IP of the CA server. Yes, that is true. I never had to do that. It was always download, request download, or whatever the syntax is. It's been a while since I've done Cisco SD-WAN, so I don't actually remember the actual steps. I could pull it up, but I'll look through my notes and I'll put the actual command somewhere on the screen so you guys know what it is. In case you use Rob's method of creating CA server on iOS, you are going to need to start secure copy server on iOS by entering IPSCP server enable in global config mode on iOS, and then on vEdge request download. That might work. Yeah, that's another option for you to do. Again, I didn't have to try that, but I was fortunate. I was running on 18.4 was the version of SD-WAN that I demoed, because that is what the current CCIE Enterprise Infrastructure exam dictates. So that's the version I went with. And then when I was going through, I purchased a kbits.live subscription. He kicked it off. I think it was like $100 I paid to gain access to his content. And then he had an SD-WAN series of videos that I went through. And then I went out and bought the Lab Minutes SD-WAN series of videos, and they were pretty good. Pretty technical, very lab driven. There were some things that he was demoing that I could not make work in my lab, and I found, and there were some things that they were missing, like some specific details. He didn't show some of the behind the scenes stuff that he had set up. So yeah, it is what it is. So I would love to go back and do a deeper dive in SD-WAN. But other things have obviously taken precedence. I didn't take the SD-WAN exam because I just didn't. Maybe I should. I don't know. Not really something on my radar that I wanted to do. Knocking exams out as they are on my radar. So it's actually kind of funny. One of the things that I've been doing lately is, instead of just talking about the exams that I want to go take and the certs that I'd love to get and put on my resume and build my certification wall, is instead of just talking about them, schedule them. Because then when you schedule them, even if you push it out a couple times because you're not ready, you're at least scheduled, right? Now you have some skin in the game. There's a date on the calendar. The next exam that I'm going to start going for, I'm kind of conflicted if I go after CCNP security and knock out the SCORE exam, the security core, or if I start studying for deploy. Because deploy, I have to travel and it's very lab based, so I don't know yet. My ultimate goal would be to get my VCAP deploy done, so we'll see. I haven't made that decision quite yet. All right, so the next question that comes on Tech Support Thursday, ticket 1. I assigned 400 gigabytes of memory to EVE-NG. I want to reduce but don't know how. Please help. So my suspicion, and this is the way that I understand how Eve works, if you've allocated such a large amount of hard drive space to your Eve server, if you were to go and normally when I add to it, it's you create another hard drive and just automatically associate it to it, and the Eve server will automatically take the two hard drives and make them one. I don't know if it's got the ability of taking that away. Could be, could not. You may have to delete that hard drive, reboot, see if it fixes it, and then go from there. Worst case scenario, power down all of your labs that you might have, export them from your Eve server so that you have the actual topology file, the U1L file, download those, have all the configurations, if any, that you had going, and then I would recommend you potentially just rebuild the server. Be good practice for you, actually. That's what I would recommend doing. You may be like, not happening. There's actually an FAQ, frequently asked questions, section on the Eve site. Go see if there's a way to reduce the size of your hard drive. I honestly don't know if you can or not. There's a question posted on Happy New Year, CCP Security, VMware VCAP DTM, and AWS OMI. It's usually the beginning of the new year. I usually post something. And the question was, did you meet your goal of CCP security? No, I have not. I have taken the VPN exam for that, and I took that back in January, and did fairly well on the exam. But then somehow, I'm really bad about committing to things. So I squirreled. I'm sure you guys have watched the movie Up, the animated movie, where the dog has the ability of talking, and it's the thoughts to come through, and the dog will be sitting there and, expecting the little boy to throw him the stick, and then he'll go squirrel and go off to the left. That's totally me. I'm very easily distracted. Nothing bad. I'm just how I am. It's my nature. So what I really need to do is I have access to the Cisco, their Cisco Learning Network, the SCORE exam, the video series. I forget how big that is. It's a lot of videos. I really need to go through and just watch the videos, take a bunch of notes, and then go take the exam. That's what I really need to go do, and just knock that out and get my NP in security. But that's probably a 2 or 3, maybe 4 week endeavor, and I'm kind of under a time crunch with the VCAP. So I really want to get the VCAP done, and then maybe, because my goal here is, I had a conversation with my wife about this. She said, go and knock out the exams that you want. I'll give you whatever time you need to go do that, so that the winter time where it's cold out and we don't really want to do a whole lot, and it's starting to warm up. It's the end of March. April and May it starts to warm up where we live up here in the upper Midwest. So my goal is to knock out these exams while it's cold outside. Nobody wants to be out there. It's not so much that it's too cold to be outside. It's right now we're going through our thaw, and the ground gets really, really nasty. Like rains a lot, so it's muddy, and it just gets nasty out. So we don't really want to deal with that. So my goal is to be done by the end of May, beginning of June, with the exams that I want to go knock out, and then enjoy summer. June, July, and August. Just go be free to do whatever I want. Not be tied to the computer. And then once it starts to cool off and winter falls upon us in September, October, get back into the nitty gritty, and then go knock out some more exams. I will get my NP in security at some point. That's a goal of 2021. But I also bought a Cisco 2504 wireless controller, and I have some access points. As a matter of fact, these guys right there. Those access points will be used in my wireless studies, and I have not figured out how I'm going to do that yet. But I would love to go get the enterprise wireless cert done. Go get design and deploy. Those are a couple ones that I'd love to go do. Plus, I'm also recording content for NSXV for vSphere, and I also want to go through the full stack of NSXT. So those are out there as well. All right. There's a comment here from SD-WAN 3, SD-WAN VPNs overview, and SD-WAN controller setup. Hi Rob, thanks for the video. The best guided video on SD-WAN. Thank you for that. Got a similar issue like below with FTP. Got proper connectivity between CA and vManage, vBond, vSmart. When I run request download TFTP command, nothing happens. I check several debugs, but no packet hits the CA. While I was able to get to the vManage cert installed on the GUI, I am puzzled how I can move the root cert to vBond vSmart. So he goes through there's a lot of like errors that he's getting, and I'm not going to break those down individually, but I did respond to this. Oh, I'm sorry, he did. He's a quick addition because I didn't respond to this one. Quick addition: while using Dynamips iOS CA with 15.2, neither TFTP nor HTTP worked. Working with iOS VCA, HTTP started to work, was able to manually add, same process like vEdges, the root cert problem still exists. Also, please let me know. Yeah, he's on 19.2. I didn't respond to this because I didn't know how to fix the issue, but I remember with the vManage, I had to export the root certificate from the CA and then import that in the vManage GUI. And then as you add in vBond and vSmart to the vManage and you add those controllers and the controller setup, from what I remember, and it could be wrong. So if I'm wrong, don't beat me up too bad in the comments. But I believe it automatically pushed the root certificate down to those devices, and then from there you would just generate the identity certificate, the CSR from the vShell on those devices, and then you would take that information and then you would take it to the CA, and then you get the signed certificates that way. I could be wrong, but that's just what I think happened. So if I'm wrong, let me know. If not, it is what it is. So I'm going to continue with these questions. So there's still quite a few of them. So, all right. So let's see. Is this the one that I already read and I already answered? Okay, so this question came from SD-WAN 17, Service VPN 1, BGP peering setup and route propagation. Hi Rob, I need your help on this because I am stuck on understanding a few things. In Lab 14, I saw you redistributed OMP to OSPF on VEdge 2 and VEdge 1, on VEdge 2 and VEdge 1. Switch 16, VEdge 2. Okay, sorry. There's no punctuation anymore, so I don't know when a sentence ends and a new sentence begins. I saw you redistributed OMP to OSPF on VEdge 2 and VEdge 1, and then Switch 16. VEdge 2, Switch 16, VEdge 2 are in the same OSPF area, correct. What will end up is, VEdge 1 will learn iOS 13, so one of the locations that's a branch office, from OMP, and the same time from OSPF. What going to happen then? 2, since VEdge 1 learned iOS 13's loopback via OSPF and OMP will propagate OSPF by default, but it also has learned iOS 13's loopback via OMP. Is this a split brain? No, it is not. In your BGP Lab 17, I saw you show IP route on Switch 16. There are only OE2, so OSPF external type 2 routes. Where are the OE2 routes learned from VEdge 2? Because you just redistributed OMP to OSPF on VEdge 2. Please kindly help me to understand this. I cannot sleep with these questions. Well, number one, I don't want you losing sleep over anything, number one. And I actually responded to this, and we went back and forth. And I did not understand the question. Because at first I basically was just like, well, I understand how the reason why the default route comes into play. You need to understand how OSPF works. So then we went back and forth, and it really comes down to administrative distance. So OSPF is more preferred than OMP, and eventually that's what I gave him some credit for doing all that work, because it was a lot to dive into. So, but I don't go into any details of how OSPF works, because that's really more CCNP, Encore, CCNP, and RC. All right. Another question from Ticket 1. INE used to be the de facto standard when it came to CCIE workbooks to follow. They haven't updated it for CCIE Enterprise yet. What lab guide or workbook would you recommend nowadays when getting to the CCIE level of studies? Okay, so this is actually a really easy answer. I haven't responded to this one, but basically the idea is CCIE Enterprise Infrastructure is just SD-WAN, SD access, and some automation added to what was the CCIE route switch. The blueprints are the same. They just added more stuff for you to know how to do. So the answer to that is, if you were to go through and do the CCIE route switch version 5 lab workbooks that I went through, the technology workbooks, and then all the lab, I literally did every one of their labs when I was studying for the CCIE, and that's what you do. For labbing SD-WAN, SD access, you can get SD-WAN working. Unless you have a service contract, I don't know how you get it. To be honest with you, I don't know where you'd find those rack rentals. INE used to be the de facto standard. They pretty much are. They're the only company out there that really does CCIE level training. But they had a paradigm shift probably 4 or 5 years ago, where they realized the market was shifting to more cloud and automation, and not being so heavy on the CCIE side of the house. So I recognize that shift as well, and that's why I've spent a lot of time in VMware, because VMware is a big deal. But at the end of the day, when you're studying for your CCIE, just assume that lab as many things as you can up. And if you don't have access to SD access and SD-WAN, I don't have access to SD access, maybe you could pull it off with DevNet or dCloud using their Cisco's online sandbox. Maybe you could play around with something in there, but I honestly don't know. I was fortunate to have access to SD-WAN bits to download them and then deploy them in my home lab. But SD access, you need hardware. So you need the Cat9Ks, you need DNA Center. You don't need ICE, a physical box. You can do a virtual machine. But beyond that, I wouldn't know what to tell you, because I lucked out and I got the CCIE in 2015. Not something I need to worry about. So I don't know how they're going to test that, to be honest with you. I'm not a big, to be honest with you, I think the new CCIE Enterprise Infrastructure has, if Cisco wants to make that a reality for people, or they want people to go certify, they need to be able to provide the access. So if they're going to make things, if they're going to require you to know how to deploy, how to work with SD-WAN and SD access, Cisco needs to step up and provide that access to you in some way, fashion, or form. Whether it's if you buy a CML, Cisco Modeling Labs license, then you get SD-WAN. SD access, I honestly have no idea. They really should tell you kind of the idea of where they want you to focus. What do you need to be able to do? Are you just going in there, or what are you doing with SD access? Are you deploying a new, is it deployment, provisioning? Are you trying to do something with it? I honestly don't know. I can't see them doing a lot with the wireless side of the house, because that's where enterprise wireless comes into play. But I don't know, to be honest with you. Maybe VXLAN and Lisp? I don't know. I honestly have no idea. So yeah. I wish I could give you a better answer than that. Truly, I do. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things where when I looked at the blueprint, I was talking to a friend of mine about this back when enterprise infrastructure dropped, and I was reviewing the blueprint. I thought it was a joke, as a matter of fact. And I remember before V5 was deprecated, and they went, me and my friend of mine, who both studied for the CCIE at the same time, we were talking about like, well, what could they do to V5 that they, you can't really do anything to V5, like what, IWAN? Like, what are you going to do, PFR V3? How are you going to make a big change, to the CCIE lab? And they made some big changes, and I think SD Access is a waste. I think they're trying to push a product that they've developed to do intent-based networking. I feel like it's a solution looking for a problem, not a solution that was developed to answer or to fix a problem. In my opinion, I don't really see I don't see a ton of people going to SDA. I really don't. I could be way off base. I just don't see it. Number one, getting access to the equipment is the biggest barrier to entry. There's nothing virtual about it. You can download some of that stuff, but unless you have a really baller server in your home lab, we're talking like UCS C220 M3 at a minimum with like the newest CPUs that support 10 core, 16 core CPUs, and you basically dump a terabyte of RAM into that bad boy, and you have 16 terabytes of hard drives. I mean, what's the upside? I just don't get it. I'm actually kind of disappointed that they went the direction that they did. I think it doesn't do anybody any help. It doesn't help anybody by doing that. I think enterprise infrastructure needs to be looked at and revamped, because SDA, like, if you don't have access to it, how are you going to study for it? What, developer.cisco.com, DevNet, dcloud? I mean, is that going to be sufficient? I honestly don't know. But that's my opinion on it. Okay, next question. There's a comment on VMware DCV3 deploying Server 2012 R2, Active Directory, domain services, and DNS. And I was trying to figure out how to get the server to become activated. It eventually did activate. And then the struggle is real. CCP security VPN exam scheduled. My CCNP security journey. The question is, hey Rob, so I got to ask. I just passed my core exam. Congratulations. For the CCP security. Testing for the 300-715 this coming Wednesday. So that was yesterday. Hopefully it passed if you're watching this. And what would be your strategy for getting your CCIE? Take every test, pass it, and then go for the 8-hour lab. For security, probably, yeah. That was actually my goal. And right now I have absolutely zero interest, zero drive to go take a CCIE. And the main reason for that, you might be asking, is number one, because the Richardson, Texas location just outside of Dallas is closed for the foreseeable future. So, from what I understand from people that I know that work at Cisco offices are closed until the end of June. So, at a minimum, I wouldn't be able to take the CCIE till then. And I wouldn't be ready for a CCIE at that point anyway, because I haven't been studying security. So, I would love to go get multiple more CCIEs. I'd love to go get a security CCIE, service provider, data center, collaboration. I'd love to get them all, right? I mean, I enjoy testing technology out, learning how it works, and then being tested on it. Testing my mettle, if you will. But at the end of the day, I think, especially for security, passing every exam because of what they're testing you on in the lab, I think that's a good approach. If I was hardcore about it and I went to go back to work for a Cisco partner and I was doing nothing but security work all day, I would go through each exam individually and learn them, and use that base to help me prepare for the CCIE, for sure. I don't know how they're going to test web security and email security in the lab. I'm guessing just a couple of little things here or there. Make sure that this particular file type doesn't get sent in an email, or if you're trying to go to this website, it gets blocked by the WSA. I don't see them doing anything substantial. I could be wrong though, but I honestly don't know. When I studied for the VPN exam, I went super deep on that, because the VPN exam is probably of, I think, the 9 different topic areas. VPNs are pretty involved. So is Well, so is firepower, so is ICE, so is ASAs. So you really kind of have to know, when it comes to security, I think of it like a home that you have to build above the water. So if you're familiar with, homes like in Florida, if you are on the coast, either East Coast or West Coast, and you find any homes that are near water, what are homes usually built on? They're usually built on a platform. There's usually some sort of, they're stilts, right? They're some sort of construction that elevates the home 8 to 15 feet above the ground, so that if water rises because of a storm, the water doesn't come into the house. Or you have a multi-level home, and the first floor is nothing but storage, and the second and third levels is where you live. I've seen that a lot too. So think of it like that, where each pillar that you're building to support the home is an individual exam, right? So ASAs is going to be its own pillar. iOS firewalls is going to be its own pillar. VPNs are going to be its own pillar. Firepower and threat defense is going to be its own pillar. ICE, web security, email security. Each one is going to be its own pillar. So you basically would have to know that particular technology silo, know everything there is to know about it, and be comfortable deploying every variation of it there could be, because that you never know what you're going to get tested on. And really, at the end of the day, when it comes to CCIE, one thing that I do remember very, very clearly from preparing for Route Switch in 2014, 2015, was that I always took my studies way beyond anything that I would ever get tested on. And I did that on purpose. And that actually helped me long term, because now I was that much more well versed in the technology. That's something that's a big takeaway that you need to keep in the back of your mind. So make sure that when you're doing your preparation for CCIE, that you're reading the blueprint, you're reading the books, you're watching the videos. No singular source is going to be good enough. Multiple sources are going to be required. I would recommend, if you can gain access to INE's workbook, KBIT's workbook, Micronic's workbook, any workbook that's out there that's got from a reputable source, I would highly recommend gaining access to it, going through all the labs. If you can get physical equipment to test this stuff out, get physical equipment to test it out, so that you're not limited by a virtual environment. Lab up as many different scenarios as you can. I like to build my labs in the mindset of having to basically replicate a enterprise grade network. If you can build it with that mindset and as your target, then I find that you're going to be thinking like an enterprise engineer, and there's going to be a lot of things that the videos or the workbooks are going to cover. That's the first thing you need to remember. And there are going to be countless hours that you're going to spend looking at documentation, whether it's a vendor documentation, some blog, some videos, some white paper somebody wrote, trying to piece together how to build a solution. Because engineering, like for example, there's probably good documentation on things like setting up remote access VPN with AnyConnect on an ASA firewall, and then tying that back to ICE, and then having ICE push the group policy. So there's probably documentation out there somewhere, some video that somebody did on that. That's something that you would want to know how to do with two-factor authentication with either Google Authenticator, Duo, whatever the case might be, where you have not only your username and password, but you have a one-time password associated to it as well. So think of those things and read what other people have done and use their experiences as kind of a roadmap or kind of a guideline to help you prepare for your exam. So that's what I think you should do. There was a comment posted on iOS to iOS site-to-site VPN with crypto maps and pre-shared keys. I'm not going to get into that. I did answer that question, so if you want to know what we're talking about, it's there. Let's see. There was a question asked on VMware DCV 10 Windows Server 2012 R2 virtual machine deployment. The question was, hello, very good video series. I have a question. You select network data. I have now watched the other videos and have not found where or how you have created this network. Could you make another video about this? Unfortunately, I can only select VM network here. I don't have a second network like data that I can select. Thank you in advance. Please keep making such great videos. Well, thanks for the comment and for the question. The simple answer, and I think now that I'm reading it, I did respond to this, but the answer to your question is when you want for the data port group, in order to select that from the vNIC settings of a VM, you first have to create the port group on a vSwitch. You can use an existing vSwitch, like let's say if you have vSwitch 0 on your host, you can go underneath that host or that vSwitch and then create a new port group and associate that port group to that vSwitch, which will allow the communication. That will get the job done, and then you'll be able to give it communication between your VMs. Out of the gate, you won't be, because there's a thing known as promiscuous mode, which will not allow VMs in the same port group to communicate with each other. If you turn promiscuous mode off, VM to VM communication will be okay. But that's how, once you create the port group on the vSwitch, it doesn't matter which vSwitch you create, or you create a new vSwitch and you create a port group and on that new vSwitch, you can call it data. And then you'll see data selectable from your drop-down inside of the vNIC settings on the VM. The question, can you kindly share a Windows Server image? No, I don't share images. What you can do is you can go to Microsoft.com and then do download an eval copy. That's how I get all of mine. There's another question on Tech Support Thursday Ticket 1. This is a long one. Hi Rob, just wanted to say how much we appreciate you sharing your real-world knowledge and troubleshooting thought process. Super valuable. Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for that. I am glad you are open to take an AMA, Ask Me Anything, style questions. I've always been curious as to what routing protocol you would use in a very large DC data center consisting of leaf spine, like a DC with thousands of racks. I know this is more of a design question, and the answer usually starts with "it depends," but you're definitely right about that. On business cost, etc., But if you had the opportunity to design such a network, would you use eBGP between the spines? So the spines would have their own AS, and then the leafs would have their own AS. I suppose there would be more than a single tier spine. There could be, yes. But if you had to design such a network, would an IGP like ISIS or OSPF make sense in this design? Maybe if it is broken down into separate pods. Thank you, and looking forward to hearing your NSX journey. So, typically speaking, if you look at like something like VXLAN is an overlay, and in order to get the VTAP communication between your leaf switches to work, there needs whatever you're tying to your VTAP, usually the loopback address, that needs to be advertised into some sort of routing protocol. Whether you use OSPF, ISIS, EIGRP in the backbone between the leaves and the spines, or you and like a single area, single level, single autonomous system, or you use iBGP, or whether you use eBGP. Each one of those has its own design requirements and technical constraints. That's the number one thing that you need to put out there. Matter of fact, there's a book that I read a while back. The book is written, it's VXLAN. I'll put the link in the description. You can get it on LeanPub. It's not very expensive. The guy that wrote it, his name is Tony Pannison. He wrote a couple books on VXLAN. It's actually a pretty good read. I think you should read that because it covers specifically what you're asking. Now, me personally, I actually am working on a VXLAN series right now that'll cover some of these things, and I simply use OSPF in the backbone. There are for the simplicity of the deployment, my goal isn't to focus on the underlay. My goal is to focus on the overlay for obvious reasons, because it's VXLAN, which is the overlay. But you could use any one of those examples in your solution, and they'd all would be legitimate. The key thing to remember, though, is regardless of which routing protocol mechanism you use in your ultimate design, the goal is to allow your leaf loopbacks that are going to be tied to your VTEPs or your tunnel endpoints need to be reachable from each other. Whether you're using OSPF, ISIS, EIGRP, IBGP, or EBGP. Doesn't make a difference which one you use. The key differentiator is, the key commonality between all those routing protocol designs that you might want to implement or test. The loopbacks of the leaf switches need to be reachable from each other, or else you won't be able to encapsulate your data traffic that's coming in from the south end of the leaf switches to be encapsulated inside of VXLAN to go between your leaf switches. That's the number one thing you have to remember. Thanks for the question, though. Another question or comment from SD-WAN 4 onboarding vEdges to the controllers. Thank you, dear fellow. Thanks a ton. I finally loaded fully functions lab. Well, you are welcome. I'm glad I was able to help you. And then we are all caught up with Tech Support Thursday, ticket 2, on DCB 10 Windows Server deployment. Hi, Rob. Are you finished with CCNP Encore? There are only 26 videos. I just joined today, referring to the, you can join and then become a member, and then you can download all the topologies and initial config files for anything that's done inside of Eve. Are there any new updates? And that's so I'll wrap up with this question because it is the last one that I have as a question. And the answer to that is no, it's not done. I honestly got bored doing it, and I wasn't getting a lot of solid views. So it was a lot. It's a massive effort to create the videos and edit them and the labs, and the view counts were not there. And there was other things that I wanted to test out that just became more of a priority for me as a personal interest. I do plan on finishing that. I have OSPF, BGP, and a bunch of other stuff to cover. So my goal is to knock that out hopefully soon. But I have certification goals that I want to get done. So hopefully I can get that series knocked out. And then there was an update that I kind of simplified the topology a little bit because there was just too much going on. And I went ahead and dialed it back a little bit. There's actually a new topology in the so when you join and you connect, or you not log into the channel necessarily, but when you join, there will be member benefits, and one of those things you get a download. You get redirected to a download page, and you're able to download everything that I've put up in a Google Drive. So there's more to come. It's just I haven't had time to really dedicate to it because I've been busy with other things that I wanted to go learn, like NSX, data center virtualization deeper, take that stuff to a deeper level. So, but that's pretty much it. This one ran a little long, but that's okay. I like it. Some of these longer form ones they're okay with me. There are a lot of questions to unpack, and I'm really glad you guys are asking more questions. I'm going to continue to do this, so you guys can expect a Tech Support Thursday every Thursday. I should record these on Wednesday and then upload Thursday sometime, but I wanted to wait until I passed my exam, or took it and then passed, before I post it, because it's 2 in 1, right? There you go. Anyway, that's it for Tech Support Thursday, ticket number 2. I want to thank you guys for stopping by and hanging out with me in this video. If you have any questions, or would like me to to ask me a question about something and hear my answer to it in the comments section below, please leave me a comment. Give this guy a like, share it with all your friends and colleagues. Hopefully we can spread this a little bit and get some. The first one took off. I'm thinking we're at almost 700 views in the first week, which is awesome. That's actually the response I'm looking for. So I do have more data center videos coming. I'm focusing quite a bit on the data center right now. So a lot of stuff coming out for that. So yeah, thanks so much, guys, for stopping by. I will catch all of you next week. Take it easy, stay safe out there, and happy studies.